my job is not on the line. There's absolutely no downside
No
to
pressure
messing
here.
this up. People just maybe not even watch it, or I don't know. Let me see what I can get for her. Let's see anything on Instagram. One second. Trying to get this. Let's see. Lesbian may not happen, but so thanks for everybody joining us today. I'm apologizing already for the technical weirdness of this all. It's going to be live on a few different aspects. Let me just turn that down. I don't know. I guess I have to just mute myself. So if you're seeing this on Substack, you're going to probably have to see this later in some other way if you can't hear me. Okay, welcome everybody to Lent with the Desert Elders. I appreciate that you're here, and thank you so much, Traci, for joining me for this specific topic on almsgiving and charity.
Yes, I'm thankful to be here. I'll start off by saying that it's the second Lent in 2 Lents where I've been asked to speak with someone about almsgiving.
Really?
And I don't feel very qualified. And so I was like, okay, God, what do you have to teach me? Because obviously you keep giving me almsgiving. So
wow,
yeah,
that's really interesting.
it was Phoebe last year. We talked.
Oh,
Yeah.
Phoebe. Well, that means you're twice as qualified as me, because I haven't spoken on almsgiving for Lent, so you're actually way ahead. Yeah, well, this is the fourth Sunday of Lent that we're doing something, and then we just have 2 more. And this is the part where it's like, oh, what have I done doing something for 6 weeks?
Yeah.
I am actually really hoping. So if you're new to me or new to what's going on here, it's Lent, but I'm also promoting Lent in terms of the Desert Fathers and Mothers with my book, The Way of the Desert Elders, which I'm happy to see has been pretty well received. And
Wonderful.
what I want to do with Lent, instead of just going around on a book tour or something like that, I thought, well, how can we make Lent more practical by using the wisdom of the Desert Elders or some of their ideas and ways of being, and incorporate it into what we're doing, if we're doing anything. And so that leads me to like a first question I'd like to ask you, Traci, is like, what has your Lent been like this year? And what have you done, whether it's almsgiving or just any other thing? I know you've studied a lot of different Christian traditions, and you can also kind of let people know who you are and what you're up to as you answer this question, as you relate. What are some of the things that are special for you this Lent, or something new you're doing or involved with?
Absolutely. Well, Lent has truly been a different journey for me, for sure. In my earliest days, I grew up Southern Baptist and didn't know the term. It just was never even spoken. And over the years, I slowly learned more and more about the Lenten season. I've written a couple of books and talk about Lent in each of those and kind of my discovery of them. So I won't go into a lot of that detail. But the last 2 years in particular, I have actually been observing Lent with the Catholic tradition, which is my new church tradition. And so I would say it's been the most immersive experience that I've had with Lent thus far. And this Lent in particular, this was not my idea. I want to say someone on Instagram suggested it, but I chose to read a fiction book for Lent. So my spiritual reading this year is The House of Breed. I think I'm saying that right. And it is I guess you would probably classify it as historical fiction. It's an individual who, in her 40s, decides to join a convent in England, and the whole journey of immersing herself in praying the hours and observing the different liturgical seasons, etc. So it's been good and rich. I've tied to also not necessarily a New Year's resolution, but just something I felt led to focus on in 2026 is doing a better job of long form reading.
Mm,
And so when I pick up that fiction book, which is I don't have it in front of me. My
mm,
guess is 300 to 400 pages. I I set the timer or not set a timer, mentally set a timer for 10 or 15 minutes.
uh-huh,
And in those 10 or 15 minutes, I want to read uninterrupted. I don't grab my phone to check,
mhm,
even if I hear a text buzz, just really focused in on at least those 10 to 15 minutes of reading.
mm.
And so that's been a key spiritual practice for me this Lent. It's been good.
Well, that's really interesting. I have a couple, you brought a couple things to mind. I hope I can remember each one of the things. But one is the long form reading as a spiritual discipline, because we are so habituated to this, these instant, scrolling, or the stories or the reels. And we get into these terrible, I think, terrible spiritual habits too, of just not paying close attention for any extended period of time. We're just being trained this way. And so that's great that you've actually thought this is a spiritual practice to be more tuned in and to be more attentive. I love that. And then I wanted to get back to what you said about the Catholic tradition. Now, are you saying that you converted to Catholicism, or you just been participating in a church that's Catholic? And what does that look like for you?
I did, in fact, convert. I bristle at that term, but I've learned a little bit about what it means. I always say
Or
I
come
joined the
back
Catholic
home?
Church.
Yeah.
It's,
Mhm.
terminology. But
Right.
last April, actually on
Okay.
my anniversary, my wedding anniversary, my daughter and I were confirmed in the Catholic Church. So that again has been a long part of my journey, but
Oh,
um it was about a 10-month process of taking the initiation classes. And then at the Easter Vigil is when
mm.
we were confirmed. So this is coming upon my very first year of receiving Eucharist every Sunday and
Wow.
observing the liturgical calendar. So it all feels very full circle at the moment.
That's kind of incredible. I'm trying to register with that. And being that your work is centered so much on, at least what I'm most familiar with you, is what do different traditions teach? What do you, and you've had such a great online presence with welcoming conversation and dialogue in really friendly, kind terms, where it's not debate and cutting each other apart, but like looking at everything. And it's so interesting that I believe your background is either Methodist or it's evangelical in some regard,
Mhm.
correct?
Yes.
And then to come to um, the Catholicism at this point is kind of a remarkable journey. What have you noticed in differences in terms of your own faith walk? I mean, in a way, like if people grow up in the Catholic tradition, we just had like a little testimony time in our church, and a bunch of people have come from Byzantine or Roman Catholic backgrounds and then have kind of converted or whatever to more evangelicalism. But it's almost like when you grow up in a certain way, it gets old or tiresome or something. And then this conversion to something different is actually quite common, is what I'm finding. So what have you noticed differences in your faith journey because of this influence of Catholicism and learning the catechesis and all that?
Well, as you know, Lisa, my first book was titled Not All Who Wander Spiritually Are Lost.
Yes.
And I still believe that.
Yes.
I actually, it's tongue in cheek what you end up writing about, and then what it's been 6 years now that I wrote
Right.
that book was published. And I was speaking with a different publisher friend of mine and mentioned the fact that I do still support that spiritual wandering, and
Mhm.
I do still embrace the teachings of so many different church traditions. Um, what happened in my experience, and it's still pretty fresh, and so I don't know
Mhm.
that I have there's been no book written on this, so I don't know
Right.
that I have the perfect words for it yet.
Mhm.
But the evangelical experience or evangelical adjacent is
Right.
um, how I would have described myself, got
Mhm.
very noisy. That's the best way I know to describe
mm,
it. I was, yes, I was very much wanting to have a conversation with anyone who could politely have a conversation about their
mhm,
theological beliefs, their doctrinal stances, etc.
mhm.
But what
Yes.
I found is that we're having some of the same conversations over and over,
Yeah.
and um, it it just caused an unrest in
Mm,
my spirit.
mm,
Um, and honestly, a lot of the things that we have conversations about, I don't know if we're ever going to land on a black and white answer.
right.
And so
Mhm,
it, being stuck in that gray was leaving me exhausted. And I mean, along the
right.
way, I'm raising a teenage daughter who
Right.
also leaves me exhausted. Just
Right.
kidding.
Well, come on.
And there was some friction that
Mhm,
happened at church. By no means a divisive thing. I'm still friends
mhm,
and loved ones with everyone at that church, but just
mhm.
unrest is the best way I know to describe it.
Yeah.
A little bit of disillusionment. And I knew that my spirit always settled when I was in mass. I
Uh-huh.
enjoyed the liturgical procedures, and was already very interested in things like the liturgical calendar. Again, stuff that was brand new to me. I
Uh,
think you do make a good point that, sometimes the grass is greener on the other side. Um, and when I visited mass in that season of kind of unrest and being unsettled,
mhm.
it just settled me. I felt
Yeah.
like I had audience with Jesus that I had lost my ability to find so much in the praise and worship settings,
Mhm.
in the 40-minute sermons,
Right,
et
right.
cetera. Honestly, in
Yeah.
the endless Bible study that I still love,
Yeah.
but I just
Hmm.
found an audience with Jesus that was simpler. It was
Hmm.
quieter. It was more invitational,
Oh, wow.
and I took him up on it. And
Nice.
so for pretty much 2 years, if you count the time in the classes, I have just learned the rhythm
Right.
of every time we get together. There's things that happen in mass that
Yeah.
seem boring to an outsider and maybe to someone who's always experienced them, but to me, they're they're inviting. They're like a warm blanket that I just put on. And for my daughter, what she has long expressed, with her mom visiting so many churches, she occasionally definitely visited more than most
Right.
children and teenagers do.
Right.
And what she expressed and has continued to find true is that rhythm gives her a peace as well.
Yeah.
She feels very comfortable with knowing what's next versus kind of more spontaneous worship,
Mhm.
if you will.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's so interesting because I was just having a really great talk with somebody about this. Um, and I was saying, she said something to me like, "Do you believe in women pastors?" or something like that. Like I said, I might be more liberal than you think. I go to a fairly conservative church, but I might be more liberal in certain regards. I don't actually think it's liberal. I think it's just a different a different approach. But one of the things I thought was thinking about is I don't know that men can follow women pastors, generally speaking, in our country with how things are. However, the pastor role I think is super outsized in evangelicalism, where it's the sage on the stage. It doesn't have to be, and my pastor isn't like that. He's very pastoral, and then he does preaching, which I would say he would admit is not like his super strong suit. But some people really excel at the preaching, and it is a kind of it's performative, but it becomes the centerpiece. The sermon becomes a centerpiece of the whole deal in a way, and subordinate to that is sometimes a different kind of performance, like a worship music performance or something. And instead of building community, you have you can fall into these ruts of cult of personality. So it's like, this preacher preaching in a way that will feed you. Nobody's relying on the liturgy to keep them through, or the lectionary that goes the same way in the same sermons each year as it rounds out. And so there's something to be said when the Protestant Reformation happened. It's like they took every single thing and just kind of whipped it out the window, and the Bible became a fourth person of the Trinity. And the quadinity, I don't know. and then beyond that, then the pastor or the preacher could kind of become a focal point too. And I would just love it if evangelical churches could do homilies, just 15-20 minutes. It's not a big thing. It's not a big centerpiece of the whole thing. And you have to do all this research, or I guess a lot of pastors are just using AI anyway to pump out their sermons. But then it would be a time, of course, of worship and intimacy with God and scripture. But also, we did some testimony stuff today, and that was such an encouragement just to hear how God works in other people's lives in really normal, practical, but comforting ways. And does the sermon, I guess I wonder, does a sermon, if it's 20, 30, 40 minutes, is it bringing people closer together in the community? Does it enhance the worship experience and intimacy with God? Or is it just kind of like, hey, I've got something on my mind, And so I wish that some of those things would be held in check, and I can see why the draw toward this more rooted, more ancient way of doing church on Sunday in Catholic tradition and some of the older traditions, high church traditions, becomes very comforting. And God, I can hear myself 2 times. I'm just going to say this to the people, anybody watching Substack right now, I'm going to end the Substack video. You can go to YouTube Live or you can go to Facebook Live, but it's driving me so crazy. I'm going to have to end this one. So I'm going to say goodbye to the Substack people, and you could definitely will see this on replay. I just cannot hear myself 2 times and completely keep my sanity. So I'm going to end this one here. I just can't do it. I'm just not ready. Let's see if I can. I'll end that one. And sorry about that. I didn't know what to expect with Substack, but that is just too crazy in my ear 2 times. But
it does sound better.
Already we're more at ease. But even if nobody saw this video ever and it was just you and I talking, there's still something that is that is kind of beyond the both of us, that we're talking about some bigger, greater things that have been, happening in people's lives in terms of spiritual journey, or happening in people's lives in terms of what do they want to do in the days that lead up to Easter, Resurrection Sunday. And so as you've gone through this whole journey, are there anything from your roots, from your other roots, from your childhood roots, or anything along the way that you've taken with you into the Lenten season that you still embrace and you still appreciate?
Always. Yeah. The answer is always, right. I think, and I think that's why I haven't done much writing about Catholicism yet. I'm still in a place where, if I can be really honest with you, I don't do many interviews anymore. So I'm just gonna be really honest with you
for doing this one.
I feel like I'm still in that honeymoon stage of feeling like I found the right faith, the right tradition.
Right.
That won't last. And I could still probably plug a few holes in it, but I also really strongly believe that God has us where he wants us. And so, I reached out to you. I remember after reading, a ways into the Way of the Desert Elders, and I was like, Lisa, what church tradition are you? Because who like falls in love with these desert elders and isn't Orthodox? I don't know. And like today, I posted a picture of a Catholic Bible that I've been reading from in the last year or so. And I had another gentleman on Facebook comment on the Septuagint that he is reading, and I forget He's, if I remember correctly, he's reformed, but so
Mhm.
I mean, I do feel like in so many church traditions that I have come across,
Mhm.
there God is waking us up to an
Mm.
ancient faith, to a church history that started
Mm.
before Lottie Moon, if you're a Southern Baptist girl like me. Um, just all, these beautiful ways of realizing that we always have more in common
Mhm.
than we could find a fight about.
Mm.
Um, a- and so it's a weird space for me to be in,
Mhm.
to feel both of those things at the same time. That I'm really, really glad God has drawn me to Catholicism, and the um regular things that you hear about them worshiping Mary, and about, what the heck is purgatory, and
Right, right.
et
Mhm.
cetera. I'm peeling those layers
Mhm.
away, and having a deeper understanding
Mhm.
of what has historically been carried through church tradition.
Right.
At the same time, I still, I still have on my bookshelf the Max Lucado book that
Right,
I
right.
read during Holy Week,
Uh-huh.
probably in my college years, and he
Mm.
walked through each day of Holy Week in such a beautiful, um,
Mm.
I would say, inspired way.
Mhm.
Um, so all of those things still carry with me. At the first time I attended an Ash Wednesday service was 2015.
Mhm.
I know because I wrote about it, and it became the premise, the opening story for my first book.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and that was actually at the same Catholic church where I now attend. It's my
Oh my.
parish. So that's kind
Wow.
of beautiful. But then since then, I have done Stations of the Cross with the Episcopalians. I
Yeah.
have done, trying to think of the different variety of things. I've, forgiveness vespers with
Mm.
the Antiochian, I think is how they say it, Orthodox church that is nearby in Grand Rapids. So
Yeah.
it, the very long answer that should have been shorter is I carry so many things with me into Mass every Sunday.
Mhm.
There's nothing like singing Amazing Grace or Softly and Tenderly in
Oh.
Mass. I'm like,
Ah.
I don't think those are Catholic.
Right.
And
Right.
they have just,
Huh. Oh.
it, if you go back far enough in the official teaching, my understanding is that they do make an effort to look for beautiful truth
Mhm.
in so many of our denominations, and so many of other church traditions, even beyond, into Judaism,
Right.
etc.
Mhm.
And so I'm trying to learn from that too.
Well, there's such a good point there, about Catholic also mean little c Catholic is, this umbrella, and that's also what they mean. They all there's enough room. A Roman Catholic neighbor we have says something like, maybe you'll come back to the mother church someday. And I and she meant that in love, and I took it in love because a friend of mine from church said her mom and her were having she left Catholicism for what she is now in her situation, and her mom was having trouble. Why did I send you to Catholic school all these years? And she goes, well, is it the same Jesus or not?
Hmm.
And her mom goes, oh, okay, like, and it was never a problem after that. It was just, and it's like sometimes we have to just get to that thing. Are we worshiping the same Jesus?
Yeah.
That can be good enough. That can be good enough. We can lay aside some of the stuff that we don't like, and the whole idea of, like, I've heard from people too, oh, the Mary thing, or this or that, or these different problems with it, and every Catholic church is different. Some are similarly in evangelicalism. You can have a very legalistic, weird evangelical church. You can have a very loving, embracing evangelical church. You can have, mainline churches that are a total mess and ones that get it right or sort of right. And so there's a lot of variation within Catholicism, within the different branches. And
Absolutely.
yet it goes back to the roots. And so to get to your question a little bit about my background was that I was a pastor's kid, but Southern fundamentalist Baptist. And that was a very straitjacket kind of thing. And I felt like I was deconstructing from when I was in single digits years old, right?
Wow.
I felt like had always been introduced to Jesus as long as I can ever remember, but also feeling the constriction and I don't know, oppression is a strong word, but the kind of tight constricting, not for my freedom, not for my liberation, not for my empowerment, even as a child, and just kind of going through different periods of being very close to God, going to all the Bible camps and having great friends there, and considering going to a Christian school, didn't, but then got involved right away with InterVarsity and Christian fellowship there, and then going to seminary, and then really being introduced to much more of the history and the deeper roots of the church. What I thought of was, you have Jesus and the 12 or whatever, and then you skip ahead to 500 years ago and you get the Protestant Reformation where they started doing it right. And that was kind of it. And it's like all this richness lost to me that I could now dig up. And I think these early Christians that I write about in the book are so dear to me, probably because they're leaving essentially Christian nationalism. They're leaving this period of time where the Roman Empire takes over the church. You're gonna do it our way. We're gonna do the creeds and make sure we're all on the same page. And it was this imposition from institution, but power outside the church. And they immediately felt a difference. A bunch of them felt a difference. And like, let's get simplified. Let's just go out to the middle of nowhere. We don't have these distractions. Of course, their own inner distractions were plenty. But what appealed to me so much is that they left everything behind to really seek God. It's so inspirational to me. It's not really something I can do or want to do, go out to the desert, leave everything behind. But I felt like their stories were lost, certainly to me, and especially stories of the mothers. We often hear desert fathers, but we don't necessarily hear about the mothers. And I just wanted to bring their stories back. So it was really such a joy and a pleasure to hear that from you as you were writing, like, wow, the book was kind of hitting you close to home and doing things I was hoping that the book would do, just kind of opening eyes and allowing these people to speak from some far off time. So.
Yeah. It's so interesting the way, like when we discussed that we were going to talk about almsgiving, we said there's 3 pillars of Lent, right? There's prayer, there's fasting, and almsgiving.
Right.
And it's interesting to see how that plays out in someone who's cloistered, or someone who, like in your book, who have stripped it all away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, I would say they're probably excellent at prayer and fasting and the receiver of our almsgiving.
Well,
maybe not always.
Some of it was that, but some of it was they were using money given to them and setting it aside for hospitality, and setting it aside for the sick, for the poor who didn't have enough to eat, and taking pilgrims in. And so they weren't using the money that was given to them, sometimes by a rich benefactor, sometimes just by people trying to support them, and which they needed for some of their own foodstuffs and things like that. But they actually were keeping it aside so that when people came to visit, they would stop their fast, and then they would bring in food and they would eat together just in a normal way. They didn't say, oh, well, you have to fast now that you're with us. They went because it was to entertain Jesus or entertain angels and to do for the least of these, do for Jesus. And so it's such an interesting way their lives would adapt. So they weren't like, of course, their lives were all about prayer. Fasting was a big piece of it. And sometimes it was too much fasting. It was actually overdone, and there was a problem. And then there were other places like Pachomius and his there were women's communities run by his sister, and then there were
Mhm.
male communities, and they actually ate every day a meal, and sometimes it would usually include fish. I don't know why they didn't say it was meat, but it is fish. And so that wasn't such a bad thing. And you can live just fine on a meal a day, especially in what they were doing. They weren't doing like, farming necessarily, or something that required tons of calories. So they had a really austere life, but these pillars were also their pillars too. And when we're talking about these three pillars, in case this is coming out of left field for somebody, this is really based on the Sermon on the Mount. In the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, at least in one of the books, I'm pretty sure, is prayer is the centerpiece, and then it's flanked by almsgiving and fasting. And these are the ways we become disciples of Jesus. And I don't know that it's been seen that way or taught that way, but that's how the disciples were taught. And that's about these three pillars. And of course, almsgiving is one of the 6 themes of Lent, which are different, different things, including repentance and confession and conversion and the other things. And so when we think about almsgiving in terms of Lent, it often is and sometimes people do this at Christmas as well. I give out of my abundance to someone who I know is in need. It could be my money, it could be my talents, it could be my time, but I'm making a special effort because this is the season leading up to, the whole Passion Week, where we follow Jesus in the Palm Sunday and the Last Supper, and we follow Jesus in this last week of his life, and we try to imitate his ways of being, his generosity and his sacrifice too, in a way that doesn't have to be, I hope, doesn't have to be this burden and what did I do, and checking off the list and making sure you feel like you're a good boy or a good girl. But the idea of almsgiving, at least how the Desert Elders and how we can sometimes, well, I hope, bring it into our lives now, is to just think about who might need your help at some point in Lent, or maybe once a week, something like that, and just give a little more, maybe a little more than you normally would, or maybe in a way that becomes a spiritual practice and sacrifice to God, and not a sacrifice, I hope, that is just driven out of shame. Um, I'm kind of curious as we were talking about almsgiving, leading up to this talk right now, what were some of your thoughts that you thought either about almsgiving and or charity in your life, or what you've seen in your new experiences with the Catholic Church?
Well, I think because one of the questions that I pondered was, I mean, obviously we're always supposed to be open-hearted and
Uh-huh.
open-minded to giving to the poor, right? And to widows and
Mhm.
orphans. And like you said, just those who Jesus lays on our heart that might have a need.
Mhm.
I think what I have really appreciated about seasons like Lent is that
Mhm.
then there's an intentionality to
Mhm.
it, right? And you're adding
Mhm.
these other pillars, the fasting and the prayer.
Mhm.
You're also adding spiritual reading. It's this
Mhm.
whole 40 days of
Mhm.
examining where
Mhm.
am I in my spiritual walk, as
Mhm.
I come to present myself to Christ on Resurrection Sunday.
Mhm.
Am I better for these 40 days,
Mhm.
right? Have
Mhm.
I cleaned some things out? I
Yeah.
guess a little bit, is
Yeah.
my heart in a little better place to come and worship
Mhm.
with abandon on what is the greatest day of the year for us, right?
The Super
Um,
Bowl, right?
yes, Super Bowl Sunday. My husband, no, we won't go there. Um, so and then reading,
Mhm.
I love the point you made about even these desert elders. Um, they still had alms to give.
Mhm.
Like you said, it could be nothing you even knew was available to them until they thought they might be entertaining Jesus. And
Uh-huh.
then let's go buy some fish. Let's go. I love that. What a great concept. And
Mhm.
what impressed me too as I was preparing to talk to you today, I mean, I'm pretty sure I could have gone through almost every chapter of an individual that you introduced us to. I wrote down in chapter 2, Mary. I would butcher her name. I
Egyptica or Mary of Egypt, I think you're probably thinking of,
I could do Mary
right?
of Egypt. Mary of
Okay, we'll
Egypt
do
I could get. And
nailed
then
it.
going into, I believe it was the very next chapter,
Mhm.
the women of the brown dress society.
Yeah,
So all of these pictures
right.
of the first woman, Mary of Egypt,
Mhm.
received three, and according to the story, I won't turn to it, but it almost sounded like a person at church, I believe,
Mhm. Right,
was led, if you
yeah,
will, to give her 3 coins. This
right,
wasn't like a, "Hey, we've been friends for a while, you need some money." This
right.
was like,
Mhm.
so I loved that, again, his heart, was prepared to receive this prompting,
Yeah,
of giving her the coins, and then in the next chapter, these women of the Brown Dress Society,
right.
they they actually helped translate the Vulgate.
Right,
And
right,
so
right,
again, and I think that's what God showed me again and again. I went back to Luke 8, which the only reason that I remembered it so clearly, I often read the Bible chronologically
right.
in a year. And on my birthday, October 5th, we always read Luke 8. And what I
Oh,
love about the beginning of Luke 8, and I'm reading it out of the Message.
mhm,
He continued according to plan, traveled to town after town, village after village, preaching God's kingdom, spreading the message. The 12 were with him. There were also some women in their company who had been healed of various evil afflictions and illnesses,
mhm.
and it lists them, along with many others who used their considerable means to
Right,
provide for the company. So that
right.
took me right to these
Yeah.
women in the brown dress society, right? So again,
Mhm,
this idea of, and I think this is what God wanted to teach me. Maybe I got it more in year 2 than I did in year 1 when I did the interview with Phoebe. Yes to the almsgiving at any income level.
mhm,
It's not ever about how much or how little we can give. It's about the heart behind
mhm.
what we can give, and it's about just open-handedly saying, God, do with it what you will. I mean, what an honor for these women to work
Mhm,
with a doctor of the church, Jerome, in
mhm.
translation. a- And then these women in Luke 8 to travel with Jesus.
Right.
Let almsgiving be as big as Jesus wants to make it, and then
Mm,
let your heart be transformed by it.
mm,
Right.
mm.
So, and that so speaks to the very concept of Lent, what we're trying to prepare to do in this time.
Right. And, I was just looking when we think about this season of Lent, whether you're really familiar with it and it either has been a burden or it's been great or you don't even know about Lent, you know, I was just looking at my windows as the sun came in and I thought,
Mm.
those windows are filthy. It's time for spring cleaning. And
Mhm.
we're even if we don't like spring cleaning, we know it's so much nicer once you get all that stuff off the windows from the winter, the dirt of the winter, whatever, the storms and stuff. You wipe it off finally, and you clear out some stuff. You open the windows back up again. You let the fresh air in, and we'll do that for our homes, but like for the home of our heart, are we sometimes reluctant? Are we sometimes I don't want to be asked of too much. I don't want to you know but how do we really enjoy the resurrection and the joy of rebirth and renewal unless some of that work has been done ahead of time? You're not going to let the sun's not going to come into the dirty windows in the springtime as well as if you do the work first and then maybe the sun son
Mhm.
shining through us if we don't do some of the work of cleaning off our windows. And I think there's something to be said of just however you want to do something with Lent, but do something intentionally, do something on the other side of it, you'll be better off. Maybe it is fasting one meal a week, or maybe it is giving something special out of your abundance, or maybe it is a special kind of prayer you're going to pray just during the season, but something that does some of the work, I think, to clear off the grime on the windows, and
I love
just
it.
the regular buildup that happens. It's not because we're shameful, disgusting worms, but because we live in a world and we have our own desires and problems. And of course, we need that cleaning once in a while. And I'm kind of hoping, and I'm speaking to myself as I say, is that these seasons are so good for us. They're so good for the soul. And
Mhm.
that means that they're good for us with each other. And maybe we can have more grace while they're doing their work. They're cleaning, they're in the process of cleaning their windows. And I'm in the process of cleaning my windows. And so
Yeah.
there's something to be said about this season, whether you're doing it in a Catholic environment or you're doing it kind of in your own way because your church doesn't really do much for Lent.
Mhm.
I hope that people kind of understand, this is a special time. It can be really fruitful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know, I still spend some time on Twitter, which some people say is a cesspool now, but I I I'm never the first to a party and I'm never the last to leave either. Um, and you'll often get this pushback of, well, the Bible doesn't say Lent. It doesn't say to do Lent.
Right, right,
But
of
the
course.
Bible sure celebrates 40 days
Right,
and
right.
as a time of spiritual awakening and
Mhm,
spiritual journeys, and or
mhm,
40
mhm,
years for the poor Israelites.
right.
Um, and I agree with you completely, Lisa. Regardless of if the Bible commands we do it or not,
Mhm,
the more we can look at these seasons as a gift,
mhm,
because isn't it interesting that in the spring is when we do spring cleaning of the windows,
right.
and the church has also given us a season in spring to do cleaning of our heart,
Right.
right? So
Uh-huh.
there's this whole mind shift that
Mhm.
can happen if you just kind of just slightly, if you need to at first, drop this idea of I'm only going to do what I can find a specific passage scripture
Right.
reference for
Yeah.
and step into the church as a greater whole. And that's
Mhm,
certainly the work that I've been doing,
mm,
what, 12 years now, right?
mhm,
Uh, a- and I've encouraged people for years and years, step into a tradition outside of your own, just for
mm,
visits, right? Like uh, an unprogrammed service with the Quakers,
mm,
a remarkable time of silence for
mhm,
60 minutes where maybe the Spirit asks someone to speak and maybe he doesn't. And
right.
that was one of the ones I took my daughter with. She was probably 12 at the time.
Mm,
And, whatever mom's doing, I'm in. I can do it. And we
yeah.
sat there, for the first 5 or 6 minutes and she did really great. And then probably about 10 minutes in, I kind of start feeling an elbow. I mean, by the end, she's like, I will never go again. What were we
Yeah.
doing? So but
Uh,
my goodness, what we can learn from the Quakers and
mhm, mhm,
what peace I have found in those moments of stillness that exist in a church service that
mhm.
I never found in an evangelical service. Never.
Right.
Um, remember whenever
Mhm,
they would say, if go ahead, like close your eyes, and if you have
uh-huh,
a time of silent prayer, and the
mhm.
guitar would start playing. Like, why do we need the guitar right now? And then for
Uh,
like, and 60 seconds was usually about 8 because then it got awkward. So, and again, I
yeah.
found Jesus in those spaces.
Mhm,
Could still, go and I am certain have
mm,
a worship experience. I
yeah.
just I, I just had to and I don't so much anymore because I felt like I left I I don't know that you have the right to speak into spaces where you're no longer inhabiting.
Mm,
Um,
mhm,
but that when I was there, I certainly did push back on things. I know we're probably close to our time. Can I tell you a quick story?
Please.
Um,
Yeah, no worries.
when we were in our what is it? What do they call it? Ordination of Christian Initiation for Adults. That's what it
Hmm.
is. OCIA. When we were in that class this last year, and it became time for Lent, and they were,
Mhm.
I believe it was Lent and not Advent, but they were
Mhm.
explaining to us that the colors of the church were going to change, and that the
Yeah,
pastor or the priest, I'm sorry, would be wearing different colors and what that meant.
right.
And my daughter turned to me in class and she just whispered, "Mom, isn't that what you tried to do at our old church?" And
Oh,
in the church
uh-huh.
that I used to attend, there was a big wooden cross behind
Mhm.
the worship team, and
Mhm.
it just sat empty.
Mhm.
It never had like
Mhm.
cloth or anything on it. It was just a wooden cross and
Mhm.
no crucifix. And
Mhm.
um I had the idea once upon a time to order different cloth in the various liturgical colors.
Right, right.
And so I think it was first Easter they put up the white cloth, and we had another cross off to the side with a white cloth. So that was kind of okay.
Mhm.
Well, white on Easter, I think I could kind of get away with. But then when it came to be like ordinary time and I was going to go green, they're like, "Why do we have a green cloth?" And the pastor was like, "I'm not saying this stuff isn't true. I'm saying our people
Mhm.
will understand it." And I would have to
Mhm.
unpack what was going on.
Oh, yeah.
Long story short, there was no more cloth on the cross ever. That
Uh-huh.
that idea was nixed. And
Right.
so that's what Allie, my daughter, was referring to.
Mhm.
So she says, "Mom, isn't that what you tried to do at our old church?" And I was kind of uncomfortable because I
Mhm.
didn't want to, in any space, I didn't want to bring in negative
Yeah.
speak for or against
Mhm.
any other Christian brother or sister. But she said it and everyone heard it. And so it was almost like the Holy Spirit prompted my response. And I said, for a long time, I wanted to bring what I was learning
Oh,
into my evangelical spaces, but
right.
instead it brought me here.
Right, right.
And
Yeah,
that
that's
and that's
interesting.
okay.
Yeah.
And so like you said, if you're an individual listening and you didn't know what Lent was
Mhm.
until you're in your 30s, like me,
Mhm.
or if you only slightly, observe Lent,
Mhm.
maybe you pick up a book, to
Mhm.
read. That's definitely where I started
Yeah.
with my Lenten practice, or attend a church that doesn't really observe that. They might say the word a time or two, but boy,
Mhm.
you're yearning. I
Yeah.
think God meets us in all those spaces. And there's wonderful books like Lisa's and The House of Breed that I'm reading. I
Mhm.
also, just because I don't ever think of you, Lisa, without thinking of the other Lisa,
Yeah.
I think her book too
Great.
speaks beautifully to this
Mhm.
idea of just preparing your heart, right, on
Mhm.
pilgrimage in her case, and a full surrender to
Mhm.
what Jesus is prompting you to do. And that's certainly
Right.
for any Christian.
Oh, yeah. Well said. So the book you showed was from Lisa Dean, and
Hmm.
she wrote it around, I believe it was same year I did,
Hmm.
2021. And it's neat because it's a little crossover of the time period that I'm writing
For
about,
sure.
and it's about pilgrimage specifically and certain pilgrims and their stories. It's really a fascinating one. And it's nice to pick up in the 40 days before Christmas and the 40 days before Easter. And in apparently in older tradition, there was also 40 days in ordinary time, somewhere around September or something. I'm not
Oh,
sure exact dates,
I'm going to
but there
look
were
it up.
these three periods of 40 days. And just like Jesus is before his ministry in the desert for 40 days, it's a time of testing and revelation, and, um, you know, inner work, or special intimacy with God. We can do something like pick up a book that's either not from our tradition or something we're interested in. I love the idea of just considering those times as this gift, that you're invited into something more deeply, that God is calling us into something more deeply. It doesn't have to happen 365 days a year, but maybe for those periods of time,
Mhm.
we can kind of shake it up a little bit, kind of
Mhm.
re-navigate certain aspects that maybe we've gotten too complacent in, or maybe we've gotten um, callous or cynical. Like I know that the things of the world, the troubles of the world can make me feel cynical about humanity, and people,
Yeah,
oh, people are just bad, and God wants to clear that out for hope and optimism and all the things that keep us going and generative. And so I suppose it's probably a good time to wrap up this time together, but I want to make sure that you tell people about your book, specifically where to find you, and the projects or things that you're up to that you hope people know about.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, in 2014, I started writing on tracesoffaith.com. The blog is still there. It did move
Mm.
to a new domain. So if so many links are broken as you try to read, my apologies. I mean, Lisa, I'm with you on the technology. We do our best. Um, I'm on all the social media. I have two books available pretty much wherever books are sold.
Mhm.
Not All Who Wander Spiritually Are Lost. And the second book is Shaky Ground: What to Do After the Bottom Drops Out. Wrote it shortly after a little thing called the pandemic. And also, and I did grab this as where I read my passage of Luke 8 from today too.
Mm.
Um, I was humbled and honored to write a few devotionals and character pieces for the Women's Devotional Bible that was put out
Mm.
by The Message, the
Ah,
fine folks at Nav Press. So
yes.
that's my latest project that I've worked on. There, I'm pretty sure that there is some kind of writing work um, brewing. As I say, I'm
Mm.
thinking through exactly what this for me was a large jump to
Yeah.
Catholicism has
Yeah.
meant. I'm also really, really have a heart for launching a um, now 18-year-old into the world
Right. Exactly.
that
Yeah.
that is not at all like the world that I feel like I launched into all those years ago. So
Right. Right.
yeah, to be continued, right? As
Exactly.
writers, we always have our ideas that we toss around.
Exactly. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. It will be interesting to see. I bet there is a book in there somewhere. It will be interesting to see how that meanders, or the path that that takes. But that um, because you started off being so curious and encouraged by other traditions, and
Yeah,
then you wound up going someplace different than you had probably even thought you would have at that
for
time.
sure. For
It's
sure.
That's a neat story. That's an interesting journey story that I think if you you know if you wind up taking that on, that could be really interesting in ways like where go to the place where God is, where you sense that God is, and it is the best fit for you. That's a great story, and I hope that that's something people don't feel like ashamed, like, well, if I change, maybe that means everything I believed was a lie, or I'm going to deconstruct until
Yeah.
there's nothing left. And it's like
Yes.
there's a lot of people that I think we all should be deconstructing, which is probably more like being transplanted into a bigger pot where our roots can go out, and that's
Yeah.
probably a healthy thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And so we probably need that. I know in our culture in the United States, there's a lot of Christian culture, but that doesn't necessarily drill down into anything meaningful or life changing, or how we treat other people better necessarily.
Yep.
There's a lot of Christian things kind of out there, but does that mean we're changed? And what would make that happen? So finding a home is this great story, of exile or dislocation to location. So, Tracy, if you do something, you keep me on the list. Keep me
I will.
posted
I
if
will.
you want to bounce ideas off. I would love to see something like that take shape, and I hope you feel encouraged that if you sense that tug, if you sense the nudging, that you just take the next step that would lead in that direction. I hope that happens.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Thanks. I always appreciate your encouragement.
Hmm. So I just want to mention to anybody listening in the replay or still listening, maybe we have one or two people I think left. There'll be a different theme, and next week I believe the theme is it's with my friend who's a pastor, Micah Morgan, and I'm totally blanking on the theme right now. Um, I think it's conversion, which is an interesting idea of what are you converting to if you're already a Christian, but
Already converted.
yeah, something converts as we move toward Easter is a theme that's really common in Lent. And so what does that look like, or what should that look like, or what could it look like? And so I hope people tune in either for the replay or for live next Sunday at 4 o'clock. And again, this will be on YouTube, Facebook, maybe eventually in some form on Substack, although who knows, that crashed and burned. But and if you wind up reading my book, I hope that you will go to Amazon or Goodreads and give it a review. There are hardly any reviews, but I know that some people have been enjoying it. It would be great for a few more reviews out there. So as I say goodbye and wish us all blessing this Lent, I hope that you find a community that is a good fit for you, or you find a book that's a good fit, or you take the next step in the right direction to make sure that Easter is meaningful, not just some other day. Do you want to have any closing words of wisdom, Traci?
No, I think that summarizes it very well. Can't emphasize enough. God is with us on our journey. So
Mm,
if you're not where Lisa is exactly, if you're not where I am exactly, uh, go with God. Go with God. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, listen to the inner voice of God, which will not be a discouraging voice or a disconnecting voice. It'll be an embrace of love. It'll be an embrace of homecoming. And
Yeah.
that's a part of discernment that we have to all kind of begin to hone more and more. But it's okay to take a step in a new direction too. So I
Mhm.
guess with that, I will wish everybody here or listening goodbye, and thank you so much, Traci.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. God bless.